Hi, and welcome to Spurbs Herbs, episode 109. And we're going to be talking about a really interesting, fascinating herb, Xie Ye. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today, we're going to be exploring another interesting Chinese herb, Xie Ye. That's Xie Ye, with the tone marks Sennae Folium or Senna Leaf. This herb is in the Chinese medical subcategory of purgatives under the category of downward draining herbs. It can be very helpful for constipation. And as usual, we'll be exploring something a little different. We're going to look at science again, as well as laxatives from pharmaceutical and Chinese medical perspectives. Please join us for this fascinating episode. Before we get into that, I want to tell you we're still doing our amazing special for our courses. If you use them for continuing education, professional development, or just for your own edification, we're offering 50 hours of courses for an unbelievable price. Normally, this would cost $750. However, with the special code 50CEUs, that's 50CEUS, this is going to be only $325, less than half off. Quite a bit less than half off. Plus, you can get a free signed copy of one of my books. Just pay for shipping and handling. That is a free copy of Integrative Pharmacology, combining modern pharmacology with integrative medicine, or Playing the Game, a step-by-step approach to accepting insurance as an acupuncturist. Just go to the webpage, www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org/CEUS1 for this amazing deal. That website again is www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org/CEUS1 for this amazing deal. So, in episode 97, I discussed the importance of science in our society and focused on the concept of bias. I recently had an experience with one of my closest friends which emphasized how important science is to our society and actually underpins the ability to create and maintain a modern democracy. And while I refuse to discuss politics during this podcast, believe me, I want to. I'm a political person. But I don't want to, not during this podcast. We have a situation in the United States which is trying to dismantle our public medical system through a systematic attack on science. I don't think there's any other way to say it. And I think a lot of my colleagues think it is a good thing. I'm going to explain why it is the worst possible thing for our profession, our society, and for the future of our country. In that earlier discussion, I focused on the concept of minimizing bias, a key and incredibly important aspect of science. I would like to summarize this here again before I go on to other aspects of science. In that episode, I was discussing an organization called the American Kratom Association. This organization is dedicated to promoting kratom. Now, familiar with kratom, I did do a big Spurbs Herbs episode on kratom. It's a very interesting herb. It's a very strong herb, and several deaths have been attributed to it. So there you go. This is an organization, as I said, dedicated to promoting kratom. It seems like it is paid for by the manufacturers of kratom. They weren't really clear where the funding came from, but it seemed they're charging the businesses. So I'm assuming that's where the money comes from. This association seems to be entirely funded by manufacturers. And the articles and statements on their website are the best example of anti-science I have ever seen. Basically, all of their articles are some form of trying to answer the criticisms of kratom by twisting scientific findings in governmental proclamations. And they use classic propaganda approaches to do so. Beautiful personal testimonies, basically saying it works for me, who cares if it hurts other people? Well-designed and visually gorgeous fact sheets that don't really say anything. And of course, only showing their case and never any dissenting or contrary information. The overall impression I got was the website seemed like it was put together by addicts trying to promote their lifestyle and funded by the drug dealers making money off of them. And I wanted to talk about it because I was getting angry about it, and it shows a problem for those who use and recommend herbs. I was getting angry because it was using science against itself. Let me be clear. It was obvious to anyone with a background in science this was an incredibly biased attempt at advocacy. My issue is it wouldn't be that obvious to non-scientists. I don't mean this to be patronizing. I have brilliant, educated, close friends who I admire and respect, and I see them fall for these kinds of scams. And that's the term, I think that's the only way you can say it. I use the word bias, and bias is one of the most important words in science. Yes, science has a scientific method and talks about eliminating variables and testing appropriate hypotheses, etc. This is all to minimize one thing, bias. Research is conducted to answer questions. These questions are really important in developing a trial, and there are protocols to help create them, such as the FINER model, which means feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. The biggest problem in answering a question is eliminating bias. We all have biases, and they can be deep-rooted, sub, or even unconscious, and can prevent one from understanding a problem, creating fair, accurate, and useful research, and prevent proper interpretation of research. A great site that explains different types of biases is catalogofbias.org/biases. That was really good. I didn't retest that, so hopefully that's still valid. So, biases and eliminating bias is really important. And there's something that you have to, that's underlying this that I didn't make explicit. I want to make it explicit right now. Under science and the scientific method and everything we're talking about, bias and all that, there's a really, really important assumption, which is scientists are biased. And I think that's really important for me to say and be explicit about, because scientists know they're biased. That's part of the problem. They're human and they have biases, and they're trying to create systems to minimize those biases that they know they have. And we're going to talk about some of those systems here, just a little bit here. And so that's really important as we get into this. They're basically saying, this is what we're trying to achieve. And what they're trying to achieve is seeking of truth, is finding out what the truth is. And we know that we can't do that without our own biases getting in the way. So we need, in our methodology, we need to minimize those biases. And I'm being very careful not saying eliminate those biases, because I don't think scientists think that you can eliminate bias. You can only minimize bias. So bringing this back to that website of the American Kratom Association, it reeks of bias. Frankly, that isn't an issue in and of itself. We all have biases and pretty much live in them all the time. The issue is when we self-select our news and information sources to amplify our biases rather than question them in ourselves. That creates extremism, which is basically, I am right, everyone else is wrong, and I'm going to be aggressive and possibly unethical in making sure the world does what I know it needs to do. And the internet can promote and make these impulses stronger. That's what the algorithms do. The antidote to that is science. Relatively unbiased approaches to answering questions. I would also add, it is the opposite to extremism, because at its core, it says evidence should lead our opinions, not be the result of them. Our society needs more science, not less. And science is always the target of extremists. They are opposite positions. Science says the truth of our universe is primary, whether or not that challenges our belief systems. Extremism says our belief systems are primary, whether or not truth supports them. We are in an era of extremism right now. I think this is because the internet, amplified by politics and the lack of accepting people and thoughts that may challenge ourselves. I rail against our current political situation in the U.S., not because of who our president is right now, but because we are not having conversations, trying to search for the truth, and reducing bias. And as an herbalist and medical professional, I think this type of extremism is present in our profession and has been for as long as I've been in it, and I'm sure for long before that. There is and always has been a strong anti-vaccine current in our profession. I used to teach a course on public health to doctoral candidates, doctor of acupuncture medical students. When we discussed vaccines, it was usually me against all the students, and I'm not pro-vaccines. I have it right here. Let me be straight. I am not a vaccine warrior. I think there's a lot not to like about our current vaccine situation. But I also think the science is clear, crystal clear. Vaccines do not cause autism, period. While that may not sound very scientific on the surface, I cannot think of any scientific question in my lifetime that has had more research done on it and the results be so completely one-sided as this question. But as a scientist, if that evidence changes, so will my opinion. In other words, the truth will out, despite my beliefs. In my last discussion of science, I emphasized the minimization of bias, but there are lots of other aspects of science that are incredibly important. One of the most important of these is peer review. This is where other scientists weigh in on a given paper of finding, trying to find fault in its findings and conclusions. This can be messy, and non-scientists and politicians will take specific things from the middle of this process and amplify them for their own purposes. This process is crucial for science, for the free flow of information, and ultimately for determining proper conclusions. During this process, often there are opposing views, and this is good and appropriate. The problem is when these opposing views, after losing their argument, are then used to support the belief systems of others. This is what is happening today with the Make America Healthy Again, the MAHA, and Robert Kennedy Jr.'s dismantling of our public health system and shutting down our peer review process. You can talk about it, as I'm talking about this, as I'm doing this, last couple of weeks, he's basically severely restricted our COVID vaccinations and completely changed our childhood vaccinations and is trying to eliminate the scientific basis of vaccinations. And in doing that, he's firing a lot of scientists who really know what they're doing and preventing and shutting down a peer review process. He's overriding this peer review process by his beliefs. In other words, they are not just dismantling our health systems, they're dismantling the system of science itself. I'm running out of time to discuss why that is such a horrible thing. But let me just lay out the bottom line and not worry about proving it right now. Science is the best method the human race has devised to determine the truth of our existence. There are no alternatives. No other systems of this exist, as far as I'm aware. Okay, I'm avoiding one obvious alternative, but it's not a method, and that's faith. And that's an argument I love having, probably not in this forum, but that is not what I'm talking about here. So there are no alternatives, no other systems of determining the truth of our existence. So the dismantling of science is the dismantling of the human race's search for truth. And it's always one of the first steps towards any totalitarian regime's dismantling of human rights, individual thinking, and freedom. As I concluded in my first look at science, science is the antidote to extremism. We need to promote it, not minimize or eliminate it. We may not always agree with the current conclusions of science, but science is a stepwise process. Conclusions will change with more evidence, but the steps are what are important. The process is what is important. Just because we disagree, based on belief, with a conclusion today, doesn't mean it won't change tomorrow. But we need to defend and protect the process. It is nothing less than our ability to seek truth. Okay, Ralph says typical Amy's, I don't know what that means, takes extreme extracts of kratom, and of these, many thousand people die. Many of last year's in Indonesia. It is not known anyone died of kratom. They just take a raw or good tea of it. And that's fine. But kratom, this wasn't about kratom. So, but kratom is an opioid, and I've seen addicts of kratom in my clinic. I feel it's just as bad as most other opioids, but it's completely non-regulated. So I think there's issues. And again, just like opioids, if you take small amounts, I don't think there's anything harmful in it. But if you don't, then there is. And the other thing well, we'll get into that. But the only other thing about kratom that's an issue for me is we know that a lot of the pain relief of acupuncture comes from stimulating the endorphin system or the opioid system, the endogenous opioid system in our bodies. And so what I find is people who are opioid non-novices, those are people who have used opioids, do not get as much pain relief from acupuncture as novices, opioid novices do. And that's been my experience with kratom users, is they do not get pain relief from acupuncture. So I do think there's definitely some issues with kratom, and I do think it's dangerous. And I'm at the point now where I think it should be banned, and it is banned in several localities, but not overall. So my locality, I know of 2 or 3 kratom stores. All they do is sell kratom. So there you go. Anyways, okay, not what this was about, but just a little something there. This was about science, and this was my statement against what is happening today, and in a lot of ways. And I think we all have to fight for science, even if we don't always agree with its conclusions, its current conclusions. I've seen a lot of shifts with science. I don't know how many times I've seen eggs are bad for you, eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you, eggs are good for you, and from science, and that's the stepwise process. By the way, now they're saying they're good for you again, but maybe not too many. I don't know. So anyways, that's the stepwise process, where it's just part of the process. Science, very important. Okay, that was heavy. Let's shift gears a little as we transition towards our herb today. Herb is used as a laxative in biomedicine. So let's discuss laxatives from a pharmaceutical point of view before we get into our herb today. So laxatives cause the movement of stool, usually in order to treat constipation. They are also used to help prepare for procedures involving the bowels, such as colonoscopy. They fall into several categories. Irritants and stimulants is one category. Bulking agents, lubricant laxatives, saline and osmotic laxatives, and stool softeners. Their mechanism of actions, MOAs means mechanism of action, so how do they work? Irritants and stimulants act by either irritating the gastrointestinal tract and increasing peristalsis, that's the rhythmic constrictions of the intestines, which push things down the intestines, by directly stimulating colonic activity. Bulking agents such as psyllium are fiber and other indigestible foods that form a gel in the intestines by absorbing water and causing intestinal distension. This stimulates peristalsis. Saline and osmotic agents such as polyethylene glycol and lactulose are actually osmotic agents that cause water to stay in the intestines, causing similar effects as bulking agents. Stool softeners are what the name implies. They soften the stool by emulsifying with it and allows it to pass more easily. Lubricant laxatives act by lubricating and facilitating the passage of hard stools. While many of these agents can cause distension, there are no major adverse drug reactions or red flags. Many should not be used together, or they may cause unintended side effects such as stool softeners and mineral oil should not be used together, or the mineral oil may be absorbed, which we don't want to happen. Interactions. Laxatives can alter the regular kinetics of drug and herb absorption by altering the transit time of substances in the intestines. This can affect almost any other drug or herb. Whether or not this effect is significant depends on individual agents. And many of the agents in this category can affect gastric motility. These effects theoretically may increase fecal excretion. However, they are most often used to restore normal function and may not cause an interaction. Laxatives according to Chinese medicine. Lactulose and polyethylene glycol are osmotic agents that cause water to stay in the intestines, causing similar effects as bulking agents. Chinese medicine, medicinals that promote defecation are subdivided into harsh, attacking precipitating medicinals and moistening precipitating medicinals. We believe that the above 2 drugs should be classified as moistening precipitating medicinals, or Run Xia Ye. Psyllium husks The third medicine discussed in this section is a dampness-seeping medicinal Shen Shi Ye. Interestingly, in many Chinese formulas for constipation, Xie Ye, or Rhizoma alizmatis, a similar diuretic, dampness-seeking medicinal, is added to move water fluids downward to the lower burner. Okay, so that's a brief introduction into laxatives and what we have there. Let's get into our herb of the day. And that is Xie Ye or Senna Leaf. It's in the family Fabaceae. And the standard species is Cassia augustifolia Balvier HL. And that is the technical Chinese name for that is Xie Ye Fan Xie. And Cassia acutifolia Delisle being the botanist. And that is in Chinese Jian Ye Fan Xie. The medicinal part is leaf. And Fan Xie literally means in English, purgative leaf of the foreigners. Other names include Senna, Alexandrian Senna, Indian Senna, Khartoum Senna, True Senna, just Xie Ye, forgot the fan part, that means purging leaf. And in Japanese, it's Bansha Yo, and in Korean, Byeonsei Yup. Again, I don't know how to pronounce Japanese or Korean, so please forgive me. Let's talk about the Fabaceae family, also called the Leguminosaceae family, is commonly known as the pea, legume, or bean family. It includes about 670 genera. Wikipedia says about 765. And nearly 20,000 species of trees, shrubs, vines, and herbs. Distributed worldwide, members generally have compound leaves and the production of fruits known as legumes. The family Fabaceae includes a number of plants that are common in agriculture, including glycine max or soybean, phaseolus beans, Pisum or Pisum sativum pea, Caesariatinum chickpeas, Vicia faba or broad bean, Medicago sativa or alfalfa, Arachis hypogea or peanut, Ceratonia siliqua or carob, Trigonella phonum gracium or fenugreek, which is both an Ayurvedic and Chinese herb, and Glycyrrhizae glabra or licorice, which is probably the most commonly used Chinese herb. So all of those are going to be in this Fabaceae family. Back to Fan Xie Ye, our herb, Bensky, and remember we have three major textbooks that we use, Bensky, Chen, and Brandon Wiseman. So Bensky and his team says the dose is 1.5 to 3 grams for a mild laxative effect and 4.5 to 9 grams for a strong purge. Chen and Brandon Wiseman all agree on the dose for a mild laxative effect. Chen say the maximum dosage is 5 to 10 grams. Brandon Wiseman say the dose in decoctions is 5 to 9 grams added at the end. So this is at the end. Category Bensky and his team puts this herb in the purgative subcategory of downward draining herbs. Chen agrees, while Brand and Weissman say it belongs to an offensive precipitant medicinal. All three texts say it is sweet, bitter, cold, and enters the large intestine. History. Bensky and his team says the herb was first mentioned in the undated Great Compendium of Pharmacology, or the Yao Wu Shui Da Cheng, which is undated, so we don't know when that was. Chen say it was in the Grand Dictionary of Chinese Herbal Medicine, and that's known as the Zhongguo Yao Shui Da Cidian in 1935. So that's relatively recent, and that explains why it might be one of the the foreigner setups as well. So there you go. Ralph is asking, I like very much Cassia fistula, which we have in Thailand. You can compare with the Senna Leaf. I cannot at this point. Often different species have very different, it can be very similar or it can be very different. So, and I'm not familiar enough with Cassia fistula to be able to make a comparison, Ralph, but thank you for that question. So let's talk about this category of downward draining herbs. According to Bensky and his team, downward draining herbs are those that either stimulate or lubricate the gastrointestinal tract to facilitate the expulsion of stool. Because the actions of downward draining herbs are dissimilar, they are divided into three major classes, each of which is discussed in a separate section. First one is purgatives. For the most part, these are bitter and cold in nature with rather strong heat-clearing properties. They're often used for constipation due to accumulation of heat. Moist laxatives, often nuts or seeds, these substances lubricate the intestines. They are mild in nature and are most appropriately prescribed for the debilitated, elderly, and those who are weakened from either a febrile disease or from childbirth. And then we have harsh expellents or cathartics. These are very strong drugs that induce pronounced diarrhea. Some of them are also diuretics and are useful in the treatment of pleurisy and ascites. And because of their strong effects, they are only used in very severe cases. So the herb that we're talking about today definitely falls under the purgative category. And we're going to talk about purgatives right now. Sabensky and his team continues with a discussion of the purgative subcategory. Purgatives are used in patterns of interior excess, which may be divided into two broad categories: interior heat and interior cold. Constipation due to accumulation of heat. When a febrile disease reaches the interior level of the body, it enters the stomach and intestines and depletes the fluids, causing constipation. If accompanied by a high fever, you have the classic presentation of the yang brightness organ stage fever noted in discussion of cold damage or Shan Lung. Very classic first book on Chinese herbal formulas in existence at this point. In such cases, one should use downward draining herbs to clear the heat and drain the fire. Constipation due to accumulation of cold. Accumulation of cold may also lead to constipation by interfering with the normal expulsion of stool from the body. In most cases, there are also systemic cold symptoms. In addition to purgatives, one should therefore use herbs that warm interior cold. So you could still use the purgatives, but you're going to combine it with warming herbs. Good quality. According to Bensky and his team, good quality consists of large, dry, unfragmented green leaves with only a few leaf stalks and without foreign matter. Chinese medicinal identification and illustrated approach says superior quality consists of leaves that are large, intact, and green with few stems. They also say they should have a long oval or oval lanceolate shape with smooth edges, an upper surface that is yellowish green with a lighter undersurface. The texture should be leathery, slightly pliable, with a faint but distinctive odor and slightly bitter and slightly sticky taste. Those are quotes. So what does it do in Chinese medical terms? According to Bensky and his team, Xie Ye has a single Chinese medical action. It drains downward and guides out stagnation for constipation due to heat accumulation in the intestines. Can be used for both acute and chronic problems, often used alone. So most of our herbs, if you've been listening to us for a while, in Chinese medicine, most of our herbs are used in formulas. There are very few herbs that can be or should be used alone. Renchen, ginseng, is often used alone, but often used in formulas. Xie Ye is often used alone. It's more common to be used alone than not. Brandon Wiseman say it precipitates and abducts stagnation and clears heat. I love their verbiage. They're very good with the verbiage. Chen also has a singular function. It purges downward and clears heat. Sennae Folium Sennae purges accumulation and clears heat. It is commonly used to relieve constipation caused by heat and stagnation. Clinical applications include relieving acute or chronic constipation and cleansing the intestines prior to X-ray or abdominal surgery. Then Zhao and Chen, that's the illustrated, Chinese medicinal identification and illustrated approach. Zhao and Chen say it clears heat, moves stagnation, frees the stool, and disinhibits water. Preparations, Bensky and their team did not have any preparations, specific preparations for this herb. Chen says this herb is usually steeped in hot water for no more than 15 minutes and consumed as tea. It's not a bad tasting tea in general. Let's talk about Western uses of this herb, because there are absolutely strong Western uses of this. The PDR for Herbal Medicines, which is one of my major texts for Western herbology, does have an entry on Senna. They say Senna is an anthranoid type stimulating laxative. The laxative effect is due to the action of sennacides and their active metabolite reinanthrone in the colon. The laxative effect is realized by inhibition of water and electrolyte absorption from the large intestine, which increases the volume and pressure of the intestinal contents. This will stimulate colon motility, resulting in propulsive contractions. In addition, stimulation of active chloride secretion increases water and electrolyte content of the intestine. These changes in active electrolyte transport are dependent on calcium in the serosal surface. The laxative action of Senna is partially via stimulation of colonic fluid and electrolyte secretion, and the secretion is mediated by stimulation of endogenous prostaglandin E2 formation. In other words, we know a lot about how this herb works because it's also used as a pharmaceutical. It also does have an entry on WebMD, which says it is likely effective for constipation and possibly effective for emptying the colon before a colonoscopy. They also say it is approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the US, as a non-prescription drug. So that is, again, a rarity in herbs. I want to talk about a story. So, I went to and got my master's degree in Chinese medicine, which is the entry-level degree at that point. They didn't have the doctorate yet. And I went, and after that, I went to medical school. And one of the things I was always kind of thinking in terms of Chinese medicine while I was going through medical school. Glad I did it that way. Originally, I didn't care if I did medical school first and then Chinese medical school, but I don't think I would have gone to Chinese medical school after medical school. So I'm glad I did the way I did. But what was interesting was while I was a student, medical student in Australia, I would observe, and I would actually do because the doctors would want me to do it, is when we would prescribe an opioid like morphine, on one line, the very next line would be Folium Senna, T. So the idea is that all opioids will cause constipation. That's one of the side effects of an opioid drug. And Senna is the way to counteract that. And what I loved that in Australia, it was Folium Senna. It was the leaves. I've seen it handed out. It's just leaves in a cup and they put hot water in it and you drink it as a tea, exactly as we've been describing here. So this is a Western use of Senna. I loved it. And I love that it did it proactively, because what I observed in America was that when a patient was prescribed opioids, the doctor often would wait a week or two until there was a complaint of constipation before they said, oh yeah, just go get some Sennacat or some other over-the-counter drug to treat that. In other words, there's no proactivity in it. Now, I've seen some doctors be proactive, but I've also said this to nurses, and the nurses say, oh yeah, no, I've never seen that sort of thing. So the same sort of observations as I've had with that. So I love that in Australia they were proactive, and they were using an actual herb to treat this. And this was in the hospitals. This wasn't out in the GP as a general practitioner, primary care physician. This is hospital use of this. So I love that. All right, let's go back to the Chinese medical side. Let's get into the commentary on this herb. Bensky and his team says, they have a great commentary as always. So their team says, bitter and cold, with a slippery yet sticky nature, Xie Ye enters the large intestine to drain accumulated heat downward and moisten dryness in the intestine. It is thus used for constipation due to clumped heat. Its downward draining action is stronger than that of Ray radix et Rhizoma da Huang. A small dose can be used for habitual constipation or constipation in a weak or elderly patient in order to promote initial movement of the bowels. This is followed by other measures to maintain regularity. One of the adverse aspects of this herb is that in larger amounts, 6 to 12 grams, It also causes uncomfortable, colicky pain, as well as nausea, vomiting, inflammation of the intestinal mucous membrane, and perfusion of the pelvic cavity with blood, which can exacerbate uterine bleeding. Thus, it should not be used for women who are pregnant, breastfeeding, or who have a history of heavy bleeding, nor should it be prescribed in higher doses for weak patients. This adverse aspect is managed by combining Xie Ye with herbs that promote qi movement in the large intestine, such as Citri reticulata pericardium or Chen-Pi, that's tangerine peel, Funiculi fructus xiao hui xiang, that is blanking on it, but it's an herb, food herb that we use, or Magnolia officinalis cortex or whole po, or by using it in much smaller amounts in combination with Ray, Radix, Rhizoma, and Da Huang. Alternatively, a tea can be made with cold water, letting it stand for a while before drinking. This moderates the effects of the irritating resins contained in the leaves of the herb. Adding Funiculi fructus xiao hui xiang, Mentha haplocalysis herba, boha or field mint, or Citri reticulata pericardium Chen-Pi, that's the tangerine pill, assists in its effects. Xie Ye is excreted in the urine and also in breast milk, so you do need to be careful. That's why breastfeeding women shouldn't use it. In very small doses, it strengthens the digestion and is thus good for those who are constipated from food stagnation and have lost their appetite. Chen and Chen, continuing with commentary, Chen say, make a note of that. Chen say, besides treating constipation, Xie Ye has been used effectively in the treatment of acute pancreatitis, cholecystitis, that's gallstone disease, and gastrointestinal bleeding. Xie Ye and Da Huang both purge downward and treat constipation due to heat. Similarly, both are to be used with caution or are contraindicated in pregnant, lactating, and menstruating women. However, the primary and only function of Xie Ye is to purge heat and relieve constipation. Da Huang, besides its purgative function, also purges fire, eliminates toxins, and disperses blood stagnation. Comparisons. According to Vensky and his team, Xie Ye is a stronger purgative than Da Huang and should be used in smaller doses, under 6 grams, to avoid uncomfortable intestinal gripping. It is also effective in the treatment of edema. There you go. So Da Huang and Xie Ye. See, this is interesting to me because I first learned Chinese herbs off of the previous book to Betsky and his team. It was that is the 3rd edition. I think I learned in the 2nd edition of the book. And in my mind, I always thought Da Huang was stronger than Xie Ye because we heard a lot about Da Huang. But it's clear that Xie Ye is stronger than Da Huang. After I've used it for many years, and I'm glad to kind of have that all supported by this version of the book. So it took me a while to get there, but I'm definitely there. Let's talk about combinations. Bensky and their team discuss one combination of this herb with another. And that herb is, we've been talking about, Citri reticulata pericardium or Chen-Pi. Xie Ye is sweet, bitter, and cold, directly entering the large intestine to drain accumulated pathogenic heat and unblock the bowels. It is often used for constipation due to obstructing heat. However, it can also cause nausea and colicky abdominal pain. Citri reticulata pericardium and Chen-Pi, known as Chen-Pi in Chinese, is acrid and thus it disperses, bitter and thus it drains, warm and thus it unblocks and mobilizes. These qualities give it a strong qi regulating and spleen strengthening effect. Together, the 2 herbs contribute to restoring normal bowel movements, with Xie Ye draining downward and Citri reticulata pericardium Chen-Pi restoring rhythmic qi movement, while protecting the spleen and stomach from the cold, colic-inducing properties of Xie Ye. Skipping the next slide. Contents. According to Bensky and his team in Chen, the contents of this herb include dianthrone, senescide A, B, C, and D. And in Chen, the A and B subtypes have marked laxative effects. Aloamodin 8 monoglucoside, Rhine 1 monoglucoside, Rhine 8 monoglucoside, chrysophenol, and the flavonoid camphorol, or camphorol. So we've discussed that the senicides and maybe the Rhine 8 monoglucoside are the strong purgatives in this particular herb. So let's talk about the science. According to Chen, this herb is a laxative, antibiotic, and is hemostatic. In other words, it stops bleeding. They also quote several studies showing positive results in the following cases: intestinal obstruction with an N equals 106. Remember, N is the number of subjects in the study, and we're looking for a bare minimum of 30 to 40, because then you can start to apply population statistics to the results. 100 is still relatively small, but is clearly a good chunk above those minimums that we need. So helpful in intestinal obstruction, pancreatitis with 100 subjects, cholecystitis and cholelithiasis. These are gallstones. Two different cohorts here. One was with 49 subjects, so barely statistically valid, and one with 20, so not statistically valid. Gastrointestinal bleeding with 346 subjects, so it could be quite helpful for that potentially. Constipation with 137, and post-surgical constipation with 276 patients. Drug-herb interactions. Because overuse of this herb can cause loss of potassium, it should be used with caution with diuretics and cardiac glycosides, which both can affect potassium. Potassium is very important. When I used to study and when I used to teach pharmacology, I would say at the beginning of the class, look, we're going to talk about suicide, we're going to talk about murder in this class, because it highlights some of the issues of the drugs. And this is one of those. What I would say, if you really want to kill somebody, and probably not get found out. I'm sure there are ways to do it. I'm not a forensic specialist, and I don't intend to kill somebody, so I haven't done deep research on any of this. But inject somebody with potassium. It'll look like a heart attack, and they will never know. And so there you go. That's the idea there. Potassium, either too much or too little, can cause death. It's very well regulated in the body. Xie Ye caused reduced serum levels of estrogen in a small crossover study due to its intestinal motility effect. So there you go. That's an older one, 1998, but something to be aware of, that it could certainly affect birth control pills and things along those lines. The American Herbal Product Association's Botanical Safety Handbook puts this herb in interaction class A, herbs for which no clinically relevant interactions are expected. And even though there's a couple things here to maybe be aware of, I would agree that there's not major interactions. There's no cytochrome P450 interactions. There's no P-glycoprotein interactions. It's probably a relatively safe drug for drug-herb interactions. Let's talk about concerns, because there are certainly concerns here. According to Bensky and his team, this herb is contraindicated in women who are pregnant, breastfeeding, or have a history of heavy bleeding. At the higher dosage, contraindicated for those who are weak. Overdosage can cause toxic side effects. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, abdominal colic, retention of urine, high or low blood pressure, and hypotonic shock. Shock is not good. Long-term use of herbs containing anthraquinone may cause severe damage to the large intestine and liver and substantial loss of electrolytes, specifically hypokalemia, or too little potassium in the blood. There's also been speculation that Senna preparations play a potentiating role and the development of analgesic nephropathy. So that's nephropathy is kidney disease with development of analgesia. You're taking analgesics and you get kidney disease. So it may affect that as well. Chen Chen echoed these concerns, saying Xie Ye must be used with extreme caution for patients who are weak, pregnant, or nursing. This herb promotes blood circulation to the lower body, and thus should be used with caution in patients who are menstruating or have hemorrhoids. Overdose of Xie Ye is associated with nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, numbness of the lips, mouth, and extremities, swelling of the hands and fingers, dizziness, and loss of balance. In severe cases, there may be labored breathing, tonic-clonic contraction of the extremities. Tonic-clonic is sort of your muscles are tonic and then they relax and they move, tonic-clonic. Think of tonic-clonic as when we think of an epileptic situation, that's sort of the typical situation we see where people are their muscles are contracting. Locked jaws, clenched fists, foaming at the mouth, and unconsciousness. Chen Chen continues to say overdose or adverse reactions are treated symptomatically using acupuncture and moxide herbs. Adequate intake of fluids is important to avoid dehydration. Brandon Wiseman say contraindicated in pregnancy, during menstruation, and while breastfeeding, so that all three of them say the same thing. Excessive doses may cause side effects such as nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain, and dependence may develop from prolonged use. So dependence is defined as you need to continue to use it to avoid negative side effects. So if you stop it, then you get constipated again. So you continue to do it so that you don't get constipated, and that's not good. Dependence is not good. Dependence, tolerance, and withdrawal are the three things that are present in addictions. The American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook puts this herb in safety class 2D, which states other specific use restrictions as noted. And these are the notes. They say, not for use in persons with intestinal obstruction, abdominal pain of unknown origin, or any inflammatory condition of the intestines, i.e. appendicitis, colitis, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and melanosis coli. Not for use in excess of 8 consecutive days. That is important to know. And that is our herb today. We've looked at another single Chinese herb, Xie Ye, Sennae Folium, or Senna Leaf, a very powerful and useful purgative used to treat constipation and evacuate the bowels. As usual, we explored all the intricacies of this herb, as well as an explanation of its category, and found out there are some concerns about this herb, though it is safe if used properly. Also, we looked at something a little different, science in general, as well as laxatives from the pharmaceutical and Chinese medical perspectives. And that was another exploration of a very helpful, important, and quote-unquote biomedical herb. Our next episode will explore another Chinese herbal formula, Xie Wei Xiangsu San, or augmented cyperus and perilla leaf powder. This formula is in the subcategory of formulas that release exterior when cold, and is especially good at treating colds with an interior qi depression. We're going to do our usual deep dive into this formula and find out if there's any evidence or concerns. And as usual, we will be adding something a little different. It's going to be another scintillating discussion of herbs, so please join us in 2 weeks. I'd like to say thank you very much for listening today. If you like this podcast, please do us a huge favor. One or both of these, subscribe in your favorite podcast app or give us a 5-star rating. We would love either or both of those. That would be fantastic. And I thank you for even considering doing that. And don't forget our amazing continuing education deal. That's the one that's more than half off, and you get a free book at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org/CEUS1. That's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org/CEUS1 or CEUS1. And you can always get in touch with me at drgreg@spurbsherbs.com or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. And we have our herb picture color code. Notice if you do get the pictures on this, and even the notes don't have the colors on it, only the actual slides. I have color coded them all. And then we have our bibliography as usual, a good sized bibliography. And thank you very much for joining us today.